A 26-year-old man, the fiancé, and a 24-year-old woman, the bride-to-be, who are experiencing significant tension while planning their wedding. After being together for 6 years, the man proposed to his girlfriend last month, and they began organizing various aspects of their wedding, such as a venue, caterers, invitations, and deciding on who would be in the wedding party. The conflict started when the woman expressed her desire to have her male childhood best friend, who is gay, as her man of honor. This best friend has been a close part of her life for many years, and she wanted him to play a significant role in her wedding. However, the fiancé disagreed and forbade her from having him in this role. His reasoning was that he thought the bridal party should be all women, and that including her male best friend, even though he's gay, would be inappropriate or out of place. He argued that he wouldn't want a similar situation on his side of the wedding, as he had a female relative, his sister, whom he wanted to include. The fiancé believed that his perspective on the issue was valid, and he emphasized that excluding the best friend would not harm their friendship. The bride-to-be, however, was upset by this refusal, especially since she had supported his inclusion of his sister, which she considered a similar situation. She felt that her fiancé was overstepping and being unfair, particularly because the choice of who to have in the wedding party should be a mutual decision between both partners. After the argument, she left to stay at her parents' house, and she later communicated to her family what had happened. Her family sided with her, calling the fiancé's actions controlling and unreasonable. They believed he was insecure and threatened by her childhood friend. The fiancé, on the other hand, sought to explain his side of things, and in doing so, acknowledged that there were other disagreements during the wedding planning. He mentioned how the bride had pushed for several aspects of the wedding without consulting him properly, such as insisting on a spring wedding despite his severe allergies during that season, choosing a live band instead of a DJ, and altering the wedding color scheme without his input. The fiancé felt that the bride had been unwilling to compromise, and this made him feel as though he had no say in their wedding decisions. One of the key cultural differences between the couple involved wedding traditions. The fiancé expressed his desire to incorporate specific traditions from his culture into the wedding, including ceremonies like a gift presentation from his family to the brides, a hair-cutting ceremony, which was symbolic and not actually meant to cut the bride's hair, and a knot-tying ceremony. However, the bride refused to include these ceremonies, claiming they would take too much time and weren't in line with the type of wedding she envisioned. She insisted on a traditional American wedding without the cultural ceremonies he had hoped for. The fiancé also felt that, by rejecting his traditions and forcing changes to the wedding plans, the bride was being disrespectful to his culture. He pointed out that her insistence on certain elements of the wedding, like the color scheme and attire for the wedding party, felt like an imposition on his preferences. He felt that her insistence on breaking traditions was a slap in the face, given that he had tried to introduce his own cultural practices, which she had dismissed. In response, the bride emphasized that the wedding was a shared event and that both partners should have equal input. She argued that while her fiancé had every right to include his sister in the wedding, she too should be able to make decisions about who would be in her bridal party, including having her childhood best friend as her man of honor. However, the fiancé was disheartened and felt that he had been unfairly treated in the planning process, leading him to suggest that they consider calling off the wedding. This comment deeply upset the bride, who felt that their disagreement was not worth ending their relationship over. Despite the tension, she made it clear that she still wanted to marry him and believed they could find a way to resolve their differences. The fiancé, after this heated exchange, admitted that he had posted about their argument on social media, which led others to label him as controlling. He also reflected on how his own behavior might have been too rigid, and acknowledged that he had not been as considerate of his bride's wishes. However, both parties still felt hurt by the other's stance. The bride apologized for her role in the conflict, but the fiancé continued to feel disrespected and frustrated. The situation remains unresolved, with both parties struggling to reconcile their differing views on what the wedding should represent. You're in a relationship with your fiancé, who is Cambodian, and you love him deeply. However, there have been difficulties around his cultural traditions and the wedding planning. Early on, you felt uncomfortable with the idea of fully embracing his culture, especially since his family had distanced themselves from him due to their disapproval of your relationship. This created tension, as your fiancé had cut ties with his family, and you never felt truly immersed in his cultural practices. His sister, however, stood by him, supporting your relationship, which was a positive factor. As the wedding approached, you found yourself more hesitant about integrating his traditions into the ceremony. You were worried about being an outsider at the wedding, because his family might not accept you, especially given the history of their disapproval. However, you also emphasized that while you were excited about your dream wedding, your relationship with him was far more important than the wedding itself. You acknowledged that you hadn't been fully open to his ideas during the wedding planning, but hoped that eventually, you both would have found a way to merge your ideas for the ceremony. In an update, you clarified that your initial Reddit post was made to talk about the situation, but it became overwhelming as it turned into a heated discussion, with people accusing you of being controlling, manipulative, selfish, and even racist. This really hurt, as you never intended to dismiss his culture or heritage. You realized that your actions, especially around rejecting his cultural ceremonies, could have been perceived as insensitive or even racist. This was never your intention, but you saw how it might have come across as dismissive. Over time, you started to educate yourself more about Cambodian culture and the wedding ceremonies. You reflected on how you should have supported your fiancé more and been open to hearing his ideas, instead of being fixated on your own vision for the wedding. You admitted that you had been stubborn, viewing things through an idealized lens, believing that everything would work out the way you wanted without compromise. This was a mistake, and you promised to make things right. You also addressed some confusion about the Reddit accounts, explaining that you created a throwaway account after your fiancé's post was deleted to avoid being harassed. However, some people accuse both you and your fiancé of being the same person using different accounts, which you denied. Meanwhile, your fiancé also posted his side of the story. He expressed concerns about your best friend being involved in the wedding, which led to some tension between you. You felt that he had not been upfront about his discomfort, especially after 6 years of knowing your friend. His post seemed to shift in tone from expressing discomfort about the best friend to hinting at feeling taken advantage of, which made things even more confusing for you. However, you decided to have an open conversation with him about everything. When you spoke, he was packing some of his belongings, and you feared this meant the end of your relationship. But after a heartfelt conversation, you both apologized for your actions. He explained that his family was still trying to be okay with you, but your actions had made it more difficult. You acknowledged that you had not made an effort to get to know his family, and that you would work on changing that. You also discussed the issues with your best friend, and he admitted that while he didn't mind your friend personally, he felt uncomfortable about him being involved in the wedding. He offered to apologize to your friend, which you appreciated. Ultimately, you both decided that instead of breaking up, you would cancel the wedding plans, take a step back, and focus on rebuilding your relationship. You agreed to go back to dating and work on the issues in your relationship through counseling. He promised to make an effort to befriend your best friend, and you promised to engage more with his family and learn about his culture. Both of you acknowledged that changes would need to be made to strengthen your relationship. Now, you're closing this chapter with a promise to improve things and focus on the love you share. The wedding plans are on hold, but you're both committed to making the relationship work. The user found an open, empty condom wrapper under their wife's passenger seat, which caused significant distress and a whirlwind of suspicions. Despite this, there had been no prior reason to suspect infidelity, and the couple had a strong relationship. The wife had always been loving, affectionate, and there was no sign of any distance between them. They were also planning to start a family soon. The user mentioned that their wife spends a lot of time at the gym, working out with weights and doing cardio, typically around 3 to 4 days a week, for a few hours at a time. This time apart had never seemed suspicious before. They also shared finances completely, with both of them making a combined total of $150,000 a year and living in a home partially funded by her family. Despite this, The user felt a sense of uncertainty and anxiety about the possibility of infidelity and was struggling with the idea of confronting her. Throughout the process, the user mentioned various ways to confirm their suspicions, like checking phone records, hiring an investigator, or tracking her movements. Ultimately, they decided to confront their wife directly. The user planned to put the condom wrapper on the table in front of her to gauge her reaction and body language, while struggling with fear and anxiety about the potential outcome. Despite having a seemingly strong and open relationship, the user felt that if the worst came true, they would have no interest in staying in the marriage. Later, the user provided an update, mentioning they had checked the dashcam footage, which revealed no unusual or suspicious activity in their wife's daily routine, further complicating their feelings. There was no indication of a shift in behavior, such as hiding her phone, avoiding intimacy, or any other signs of infidelity. Despite all this, the user was still unsure and nervous about the upcoming confrontation. In the final update, the user shared that they had gone ahead with confronting their wife. When she came home from the gym, they followed through with their plan, sitting at the kitchen table and waiting for her to return from the shower. Although the user was deeply nervous and scrutinizing every detail for signs of infidelity, they were still uncertain about what would happen next. I sat there, waiting for her to come out of the shower, feeling a growing sense of anxiety in my chest. The smells of cologne, soap, and deodorant filled the air as she showered. I tried to calm myself down, but the nerves were overwhelming. My mind was racing with a question that I could no longer ignore. I was close to chickening out, to keeping my doubts to myself, but the doubt lingered too strongly. I had to ask. When she stepped out of the bathroom with her wet hair and her usual t-shirt, looking as beautiful as ever, I was still on edge. We sat down at the kitchen table as we always did, expecting to chat about our day, but I couldn't hide the unease in my body. She noticed right away, and after a few moments, she asked, "What's going on?" I hesitated before asking, "Have you lent your car to anyone recently?" She seemed confused and answered no. Then I asked, "Have you had any passengers in your car the last few weeks?" She thought for a moment and said no again. I pressed on asking, "Has anyone besides you or me been in your car recently?" She responded with another no. By now, I was getting more anxious. Her confusion was clear, and she asked, "What's going on?" I could barely explain myself, but the words had to come out. "I found something in your car while I was cleaning it," I said, pulling a condom wrapper out of my pocket and placing it on the table in front of her. She looked at the wrapper but didn't react immediately. The silence between us was thick. "What is this?" she asked, already knowing. "It's a condom wrapper," I said, trying to stay calm. "But why is it on our kitchen table?" she demanded. I explained that I found it under her car seat, but she looked genuinely puzzled, as if the whole situation was baffling to her. Her confusion shifted to concern as she asked me if I thought it was hers. I hesitated and said, "I'm not sure, is it?" She was immediately upset, her voice rising. "You seriously think I'm cheating on you? Are you crazy? What is wrong with you?" I could feel the anger in her words, but also the hurt. She grabbed her phone and waved it at me, offering me full access. "Look at my phone. Call my sister. Call my friends. I don't know what else you want me to do." We sat there in silence for a few minutes. I stared at her, trying to find any clue, any sign of deceit. There was nothing. She was sitting there, trying to be patient, though clearly hurt and confused. Finally, I asked her, "What would you think if the roles were reversed?" She admitted that she'd probably feel suspicious too, but said she would try to trust me. In the next few minutes, she ran through the last few weeks, remembering where she'd been and who she'd been with, trying to figure out an explanation. Then, she remembered something, a baby shower for a friend at work. Her friend couldn't attend but asked her to take the gifts to the party, so they both went to her car to put them in. That was when it happened. Her friend had spilled her purse all over the floor in the passenger seat. That was the only plausible explanation my wife could think of. Maybe the condom wrapper had come from there. She decided we should call her friend and clear this up. The phone call went through, and when my wife asked her friend about the spilled purse, the friend confirmed she had spilled it in the car. When my wife asked her if there were condoms in the purse, the friend said she sometimes carried them, though she didn't know how an empty wrapper would end up in the car. My wife's suspicion seemed to dissolve as her friend confirmed this, and my wife turned to me, asking if I was satisfied with the explanation. I felt a huge wave of relief. It wasn't the answer I had been dreading, but I was still filled with guilt for even questioning her. I started crying. Tears of relief, of guilt, of overwhelming emotion. I felt so ashamed of myself for ever doubting her. My wife, who had been so calm throughout, couldn't help but laugh. "I can't believe you thought I was cheating on you," she said, though she admitted she might have thought the same if our roles had been reversed. She even said it was kind of cute how nervous and jealous I had been. The tension eased, and we decided to finish our evening with a glass of wine and go out to dinner. During dinner, we laughed, talked about our plans, and shared how excited we were to start trying for a baby. As we sat there, I knew without a doubt that my wife had done nothing wrong. I knew her better than anyone, her voice, her body language, her mannerisms. There was nothing about her that suggested dishonesty. She loved me, and I loved her. It was all just a misunderstanding. I know some of you might have experienced similar doubts, but I'm so grateful it turned out the way it did. I will probably share this with my wife at some point, though she's not likely to enjoy the fact that I went to Reddit for advice. But all is good now. Really good. I am lucky to be married to someone as incredible as her.